This is episode 236 of Mitolife Radio, and this is a life update. This is actually my first recording being back in Idaho. I know some listeners follow me on social media and some don't. So maybe you don't follow me on those social media channels, or you've just been taking a break from the internet, which is good to do every once in a while. You may have missed my short journey back to California. Did a show called Why I Moved Back to California. And a big reason was for family, because I don't like missing birthdays and holidays. And I'm learning that it's just a fact of life when you live out of state from where your family lives. It's really not fun to miss your parents' birthday or your siblings' birthday or holidays every year. But it really comes down to a difference in lifestyle. I'm sure a lot of you can relate with your family. I love my family. We have a lot in common. They actually all take many of the Mitolife supplements. But when it comes to living in the city versus living in a rural environment, they prefer the city. And maybe even more importantly, they prefer nice sunny weather year round where you don't have to shovel snow. And I get that. When I had the intuitive hit to move north right before COVID hit out of California, I grew up there for the first 30 years or so of my life. And something told me, get out of Dodge ASAP. And I just dove headfirst into Idaho living, and not just Boise, South Idaho. This is North Idaho living, where there's heavy snow. The winters are brutal, harsh, and sometimes long. And there's so much to learn about all of the heavy machinery and equipment and all the tips and tricks to actually make it up here and thrive. And that's been my experience for the last 3 years, living in this interesting environment where the summers are super beautiful, and I think more beautiful than California. But the winter, you have to prepare for it. And in the middle of it, stuff's going to go wrong. Now, I went through the ringer with generator stuff, and being fully off grid, and when the sun's not out, you're reliant on a generator to run your house, to run your water pump. It's not just this fairy tale, oh, I'll just light candles and it'll be kumbaya and everything will be good. No, I need electricity for some pretty basic stuff, like pumping water from the spring into the house. And that's where generators come in. Ideally, they automatically kick on. They charge your off-grid battery bank, and then your batteries run your house overnight. And ideally, you're not running your generator while you're sleeping overnight, so you're not listening to that loud hum. So long story short, I went through 3 generators in under 3 months. And a few of them I bought new. So I don't know if I was cursed or what happened, but I ended up hand filling a Champion generator, which is pretty much this China built backup generator that someone uses when they're on grid to run their house for a couple hours or a day if the power goes out. But using that full time in the winter really rocked my nervous system. And besides having to deal with the noise and the vibration, I had to drive at least a few times a week to the gas station to fill up gas cans. And I picked up at least 9 at a time. So while I was juggling Mitolife and the podcast and my academy and friends and family and a relationship and all of this stuff, it just kind of broke me. I became really frustrated with off-grid living. So fast forward, I make the decision to move back to my hometown to be within an hour of my family so that I could see them every week. And I thought life was going to be easier. I was going to be on grid, same day Amazon Prime. Who doesn't love that? Where I live, Amazon Prime takes 4, 5, 6 days, potentially longer in the winter. But it was not what I expected. The heat was a lot different from Idaho heat. It was so intense, and I love sunlight. I like getting out and getting exposure on my skin and eyes in the summer to sunlight, but I'm not one of those people that absolutely requires it year round to feel good and sustain my mood. In fact, my mood is the best when there is a heavy thunderstorm overhead. That's when I feel the most peaceful and calm. I also like going out in the middle of winter, maybe it's December, January, February, and jumping up into my Kubota tractor or skid steer and clearing snow while listening to podcasts with the noise cancellation feature on, so I don't have to listen to all the noise around me. I actually really enjoy that because I'm getting exposure to nature. I'm getting cold exposure on my face, which there's some information to support that just hitting your face, the nerves on your face with cold, is akin to doing cold thermogenesis in a tub. So as you guys know, I'm always questioning things, and lately I've been wondering about that, if dunking in ice baths is even necessary when you live in a northern latitude. I might experiment with it this summer. I like covering my extremities, beanie, neoprene gloves, boots. That's how I've always done ice baths in the past. And when I was down in Southern California, I was absolutely doing ice baths, mid 50 degree Fahrenheit water, dunk in for 10 minutes. And I felt really great. And it felt natural to do that in that extreme heat when it was in the 90s or mid 90s. But in the winter here, it feels more natural and intuitive to me to want to warm up, whether that's in the wood burning hot tub or in the wood burning sauna. And then the cold exposure would just be going outside the front door and living in this environment. I've said before in previous podcasts that Rosita cod liver oil was a game changer for my cold tolerance. I was eating a lot of carbohydrates, which is supposed to fuel the fire, of course, combined with animal protein and saturated fat. And supposedly I was doing everything to build and stoke my metabolic fire, to generate body heat through improving my metabolic rate. And in practice, it didn't work. But when I added in Rosita cod liver oil, which there's a million arguments out there on the internet and especially social media, and just tons and tons and tons, endless fear porn out there. And one of the big ones was vitamin A toxicity. People have been going crazy about that for a while. And cod liver oil has way too much retinol or vitamin A, and that accumulates in the liver and can cause toxicity. And like everything else, like iron overload, iron toxicity, which I learned about the hard way, there's always the other side, which social media, keyboard warrior, influencers never acknowledge the other side. We're all about extremes. It's always this extreme or that extreme, never balance. And what I aim to share with my work and my podcast is balance, even if that's through some of my failed experiments. And one of my successful experiments was increasing my vitamin A intake. And as it turns out, on my self-decode health report, I actually have increased requirements for vitamin A. And my direct experience reflects that. The more vitamin A I took, especially high doses for 3-4 months, especially right in the middle of winter, I would go outside, and when my extremities were usually freezing, there was almost steam coming off of them, that I felt so warm and so resilient in this extreme cold environment. And the only thing I changed was taking cod liver oil every day. It turns out that the Vikings actually used cod liver oil. It's an ancestral food. They used it to get through the winters. Now, I don't think it's just the vitamin A. I think there's unknown compounds in properly prepared cod liver oil. I'm not talking about the stuff at the grocery store. Rosita is completely on another level. And maybe part of it's the omega-3s, the DHA and EPA, which they are natural antifreeze. I would just encourage someone, if they're consuming those, especially in large amounts, especially Charles Poliquin amounts, like tens and tens of grams, I actually don't think that would be harmful if someone were to balance it with vitamin E. And I have the proper ratios linked in studies on my PUFA Protect page. There is specific ratio of polyunsaturated fatty acid intake, PUFA intake, to vitamin E intake. And when you imbalance that equation, that is where you get lipofuscin and age spots. But I am starting to think that one of the biggest benefits to omega-3 fatty acids is their natural antifreeze. That's what they do to fish. Cold water fish are able to be mobile because of the high amount of highly unsaturated fatty acids, like wild Alaskan salmon. They're really high in HUFA or PUFA because they're in such frigid cold waters. So going back to my story, I moved down south so that I didn't have to travel as much, so I could see my family more often. I was very fortunate to have my girlfriend come down with me for that experiment, and I felt bad, but then getting back up here, she was saying that she appreciates it a lot more to see the contrast, to not have the noise pollution, the constant helicopters and airplanes flying overhead all day, every day, and then also the clean air and water. This cabin up here is on a spring, and I've never had the water run out, so I could just assume that it's an unlimited source of spring water, especially after the long winter and the snow melts. That would replenish the spring. So unlimited spring water, pretty much unlimited clean air, except for the occasional fires that happen up here, which are nowhere close to what happens down in California. Just the air and water alone are my top reasons to deal with rural living, to deal with the snow, to deal with the longer drives. And then you just add in the lack of noise and light pollution, and it's just so much better for my nervous system. I just feel so much more grounded and calm and clear. And if I have to fly in planes more often to catch birthdays and holidays, I'll just have to find a way to make it easier. I think the main goal of COVID was to divide the family. Humanity's already divided. They've already succeeded there. Everyone's always trying to tear each other down and fight with each other. So that's another topic. But as far as dividing the family, I think that was the major goal. And they did it with vaccines, right? So half the family got the shot, the jab, and then the other half of the family doesn't. And then there's this big rift that's created, and they just weakened the family and thus weakened the country. I am very blessed and fortunate to not have dealt with that. My whole family did not get the jab. So there was never that tension that was created between the family. And I've always just done my best to stay close to them. If I'm distant, that means FaceTiming at least once a week. I think it's really important to maintain that close contact with your family and realize that if you have a different idea of what an optimal environment is than them, you have to honor that. And you can only help them if you're in relatively optimal health. I had to learn that the hard way, and I'm glad I did. I definitely appreciate this lifestyle so much more now. And I think a big part of it is the prepper part of me, knowing that if the world just suddenly plunges into full-on apocalypse, I'll be somewhat comfortable with solar panels and water and air and electricity. There's even food for the cats here. There's endless ground squirrels in the spring and summer. The one thing I haven't figured out yet is natural gas. Eventually, I'll probably invest in one of those contraptions where you can throw in animal manure or compost and you can make your own natural gas. But the tricky thing with that is it needs to be in an insulated room. So maybe I'll put that down in my garage or something because it needs to stay above freezing year round. So let's jump into some of the questions that listeners sent in. A lot of it was about the geodesic dome, which I put up down there, and it was a great learning experience to see how it worked and how it produced. The challenge down there was keeping it cool. Even with a 2,600 gallon koi pond and that huge body of water, I would walk into there and the temperature would be 105 degrees Fahrenheit or hotter. So installing misters was a game changer, especially because that environment was not very humid. So when the misters went off, the humidity would quickly drop down, but they would lower the temperature by a good 10 degrees within 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to have the opposite problem up here, which is keeping it warm in the winter. And with these growing domes from growing spaces, you can grow year round when it's freezing out. And you have the option to use like a propane heater or a wood stove. The design of the dome already keeps it above freezing. You're tapping into the heat of the earth, which stays above freezing. It's around 50 something degrees. And the koi pond releases heat to keep it warmer in the winter. There's all these things built into the design of it. But if you use a heating source, such as a wood stove or a propane heater, you're actually able to keep your avocado trees, even in this climate where we are, or citrus. And in fact, it's been my plan for 2 years to put up a geodesic dome here in Idaho. And so I bought fruit trees and I kept them alive through the winter in my basement. I had a lemon, a lime, even goji berry, and they all produced, even being indoors for 5 to 6 months. So I'm really excited to see what the dome could do. I'm going to go with their biggest, which is a 42-foot dome, and see what's possible, see what fruit trees I can grow in there. But until then, we're actually working on a fruit orchard in what used to be the goat pen It's a lot less work to put up automatic waters and have a fruit orchard. And I'm sure with the goats being in there for a few years, that soil is probably primed for optimal growing. So we just cleared it out the last couple days. It's level. It's just dirt right now. But there's enough space for at least 30 to 40 fruit trees. So we went out the other day and bought 20 raspberry plants, learned a lot about raspberries, talking to these farmers. And then from another farm, bought a couple apricot trees, some goji berries, some strawberries, blackberries. You can grow so much here in North Idaho when the weather's nice, and that really makes the winters worth it. If I had to pick my favorite fruit, it would probably be apples. And growing up in Southern California, having those apples versus coming up here and having fresh apples from the Pacific Northwest, there's absolutely no comparison. And the same thing also goes for oysters and seafood in general. The quality of seafood up here is just worlds beyond what I experienced down there. And again, going back to my genetics, according to Self-Decode, my ideal diet is the Mediterranean diet. And I do find that I feel incredible the more seafood I eat. And of course, I balance it out with my vitamin E, eating seafood. I take that every day anyway. But if I had to choose between red meat and, say, salmon, I would choose salmon every time. So the goal with growing up here is to have this seasonal outdoor garden with berry bushes and tons of different fruit trees, pears, plums, apples, peaches, whatever will thrive up here in the cold. And then inside the dome, have citrus, avocado, maybe passion fruit, and then have the perimeter consist of largely leafy green vegetables. Someone asked, how can we fly on planes while limiting exposure to things that deteriorate our health? Well, I've had a good 2 to 3 years to think on this question, flying quite a bit. Not as much as some of the health influencers that go to every conference and fly around the world on speaking tours and book tours. I could never do that, but flying 6, 7, 8 times a year, something like that. I've experimented with a lot of different things. What I can say is do not wear silver embedded EMF blocking clothing. That definitely makes you an antenna for EMFs. It's one thing if you're grounded directly to the earth and have silver touching your skin. It's another if you're a floating ground and you're just walking around in this sea of electromagnetic fields and Wi-Fi bubbles. Who knows the effects, but what I suspect is that there are secondary frequencies that are generated when the EMFs hit that silver, and we don't know the effects of those secondary frequencies. My go-to now is very simple. It's magnesium and ascorbic acid. If I just had to pick one, it would absolutely be just ascorbic acid, also known as vitamin C. And I'm speaking in the context of EMF exposure. It would be vitamin C, vitamin E, and magnesium. That is my EMF stack. They protect against EMF in various ways. But again, to me, the most powerful one would be vitamin C because it's called a redox balancer. It's not just an immune booster. It's not just an antioxidant. Vitamin C actually supports your redox system, reduction and oxidation. That's the tendency of molecules to gain or lose electrons, and EMFs disrupt that in a major way. And so when you're constantly adding in small frequent doses, which is the key, not megadose, small frequent doses of vitamin C, that protects your redox system. So my strategy is the Mitolife vitamin C, 4 capsules is 1.2 grams, 1,200 milligrams. And I take that every hour when I'm traveling, maybe even more frequently if I'm feeling off. And as long as I don't take a ton all at once, I don't experience loose stools or diarrhea. Really, the trick with vitamin C is small, frequent doses. People really have to understand that to gain the benefit of vitamin C. Because as you're raising your plasma ascorbate levels, that ascorbate in your plasma is being transferred into your tissues, into your adrenals, your eyes, your brain. These are areas of the body that have high requirements for ascorbate. And that totally shatters the myth that we only need a couple 100 milligrams a day when these tissues require so much more. And then you add on to that the EMF exposure, just living on Earth. Our requirement for vitamin C is way higher than the RDA and even way higher than most of the health educators talk about. Someone asked, do you believe drinking RO water, so reverse osmosis water, long-term makes one mineral deficient? I hear this criticism a lot. This is another one of those fear things. I salt every single meal that I eat, and I rotate the different salts that I consume. My favorite is the Icelandic salt from Crucial 4. We can get sodium, calcium, potassium, and magnesium from our water supply, but we could also get those from our food. So if you consume gallons of reverse osmosis water without any minerals added for a long period of time, yes, that will probably make you mineral deficient. But what if that person is consuming a lot of dairy, getting their calcium, a lot of avocados, getting their potassium, and on with all of the other macro minerals? Then would they become mineral deficient? Maybe they're taking Shilajit every day, which I think is a great idea. So there's a lot more context to answer this question. My short answer is no. And kind of a good follow-up, someone else asked, what are your thoughts on adding a bit of salt to drinking water? If that makes you feel better, go for it. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Oftentimes, I'll crave my Mitolife drinking water from the 7-stage filter with nothing else in it, and I'll just drink that, guzzle it straight. Not a huge amount, but just take several sips, and I feel incredible doing that. And I do that often, and I'm alive and thriving. Someone asked, dissolve it all dosage that will help get rid of cysts. So dissolve it all, for those of you that don't know, it's my systemic enzyme product. It's a mix of nattokinase and serrapeptase, and people have used it for this purpose to help with polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, cysts, growths, any kind of abnormal growth in the body. And since I'm not a doctor, I can't prescribe or recommend a dose for a different condition. If it were me, what I would do with dissolve it all or systemic enzymes in general, I would just start slow, start with the serving size and take that for maybe a week. See if anything changed. If nothing changed, double the dose. If nothing changed again, increase the dose and just slowly increase it until you see results. What are your thoughts on brown rice versus white rice? The wild rice isn't always in stock. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I've seen some biohackers talk about the high levels of arsenic in brown rice, but what you don't hear is that zinc, selenium, even spirulina can all eliminate arsenic and protect against arsenic poisoning. I recently came out with zinc carnosine. That's my favorite form of zinc. It's zinc bound to the amino acid L-carnosine, which is an incredible anti-aging amino acid. It's anti-glycation. It does so many things that are protective for the human body. But combined with zinc, it's just incredible. So I take at least one of those, usually 2 of those a day. And that is my strategy to help protect against and eliminate any arsenic in my body. Current supplement stack. My favorite stack right now is the jellyfish jolt. That's the wild jellyfish collagen, encephalon, which is the combination of that microalgae for the brain, phosphatidylserine, and ginkgo biloba, and update. That's a paraxanthine drink that I've been obsessed about that I'm going to have a show about later on this month. You could add the HVMN 1,3-butanediol exogenous ketone shot to that stack. Could also add magnesium. I take my beef liver. Of course, it just keeps adding on. But if I just had to give a bare bones skeleton for my favorite current stack, it would be that, the jellyfish, the encephalon supplement, and the update drink. So a little teaser on the update drink until I have the podcast on it. It's basically paraxanthine, which is a metabolite of caffeine. It's actually the main metabolite. Over 80% of the caffeine that we consume breaks down into paraxanthine, and then some breaks down into theobromine, which is found in chocolate, and then some into theophylline. But the main benefit of caffeine, the increased focus and drive and creativity and mood, all that comes from paraxanthine. But the problem arises with someone like me, which is a slow metabolizer of caffeine. So it stays in my system a lot longer than someone that's a fast metabolizer. And because it stays in my system so long, it takes a long time to break down into paraxanthine. So what happens is I get a lot of the negative effects with less of the positive effects. So this energy drink called Update skips that caffeine step, and you're going right to the paraxanthine to get all the benefits. So I put it up on my website. I have the white paper linked there, but I'll read some of the benefits of paraxanthine here. It does not induce sleep rebound, hypothermia, or anxiety, while caffeine does. Unlike caffeine, paraxanthine provides neuroprotective benefits by warding against dopaminergic cell death. This suggests that paraxanthine is a better wake-promoting supplement for normal consumption, as well as those suffering from neurological conditions. It increases sustained attention, reaction time, and short-term memory. It helps with reasoning and response time to cognitive challenges. I haven't tried it, but supposedly you can drink it pretty close to bedtime and still fall asleep, which I'm kind of too nervous to try. But it's been blowing me away. I did daily espresso shots in a balanced way. I wasn't mainlining espresso into my veins 24/7. My strategy was 2 espresso shots, home roasted, in the morning, always after breakfast, and sometimes an affogato a couple times a week midday, but mostly just once a day. And I did that for 2 to 3 years and without breaks. And over time, I found that it just created this kind of low roar of anxiety in my nervous system and that kind of jittery feeling. So for the last 3 months, I just stopped. I didn't have any withdrawals. I didn't have any cold turkey symptoms that were negative. Maybe it's all the Mitolife supplements. But recently I added in Paraxanthine about a month ago, and I've been drinking them every day, usually once a day, sometimes 2 cans a day. And I just feel really good. And I never wake up having that just instant anxiety feeling starting the day. It just feels really good on my nervous system. Someone asks, what are the top 5 things you'd encourage people to do or change for overall better health? One is to supplement vitamins, minerals, and enzymes. There's a very common meme going around that all we need to do is to eat real food and we can get all of our nutrients from our food, and we don't need to, quote, waste money on supplements. That has been the opposite of my experience. I got into this with raw veganism, vegetable juicing, and although I think it helped to give me a reset from the standard American upbringing, it definitely did not replenish my ascorbate levels, my B vitamins, my fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. It didn't have an effect on my fibrosis to reduce scar tissue. All of that came from taking isolated supplements, many of them synthetic isolates. So that's my first tip, is to take the right supplements, especially based on your upbringing. Since I didn't enjoy meat growing up, I know that I have certain deficiencies. All the fat-soluble vitamins goes without saying, but also zinc and the trace minerals that are present in shilajit and pretty much all the stuff that I provide with Mitolife. My second tip is to take fat-soluble vitamins separately. When you go to the supplement section at your health food store and look at the D3 cholecalciferol supplements, you'll find that 99% of them are combined with vitamin K2. Recently, I made a social media post that talked about how the fat-soluble vitamins compete for absorption. And supplement formulators do not take this into account. So this is what differentiates me and Mitolife from a lot of the other supplement companies out there, especially the huge names out there in the health food store, is they're not doing daily research to find out what's optimal. And what a lot of people don't know is that vitamin D blocks K2 absorption. And the same thing goes for all the other fat-soluble vitamins. They compete for absorption. So when you're supplementing them, you want to take them on their own separately. So what I like to do is take, whether it's cod liver oil or Pufo Protect or Purely K, which are Mitolife products, with breakfast. And then the remaining 2, I'll take the other one with lunch. And then the last one I'll take with dinner. You can make them the same every day. I tend to just switch it up. And as long as you can remember in your head what you already took, then just take the next one with your next meal. Third thing I recommend is to question popular social media health narratives. Unfortunately, I was one of the big proponents of iron overload the last several years. And then I learned that the people that these quote unquote experts were referring to, like Robert Crichton, they were actually butchering their work and perverting it and altering it different from what their research actually says. And so what we have now is an army of health influencers that are parroting from one expert that wrote one book quoting this expert, and they're not even quoting the expert correctly. So that's why I changed my mind on iron overload, largely because I heard it from the horse's mouth, aka Robert Crichton. But that goes for a lot of other health narratives, like the whole food vitamin C versus ascorbic acid. That's another one that's BS. Ascorbic acid is vitamin C. In the clinical literature, they are synonymous. There's no difference. There's no difference between synthetic vitamin C and the vitamin C that you find in your orange. They are exactly the same. Fourth thing is I would find out whether you are a slow or a fast metabolizer of caffeine. If you are slow, I would recommend experimenting with paraxanthine and see if you feel a difference in your nervous system. Fifth thing is live in an environment that you'll thrive in. I think a lot of people, whether for family reasons or financial reasons, they're living in an environment that they're not genetically suited for. I feel like I'm genetically suited for a northern latitude climate. As I said before, I love the snow. I love the cold. I love the winter. Maybe your ancestors are not from a cold place. Maybe they're from a tropical place. So start to think about that and maybe make some hard decisions and shift things around in your life to at least work towards living in your optimal environment. New thoughts on EMF protection. It's pretty much still the same. I could say that I definitely felt like I was underwater in Southern California, even sleeping on the Magnetico sleep pad, having a couple blue shields around, taking ascorbic acid every day. I was so busy that maybe I just wasn't consistent enough. I still felt like I was getting slammed. I was getting insomnia. And again, that could have been partly the heat. It's always hard to track things down to a single variable with your health. And that's what I see a lot of people make that mistake. And it helps to remind me to not make that same mistake, because it's really easy to point at this one thing and say this caused this. But when there's a million things going on at once, who knows which one had the biggest influence to get that effect. I can say that we're sleeping a million times better out here. Last night, got 10 hours of sleep, and I couldn't do that down there. The max amount of time I could be asleep was about 8 hours. Then I would just have to get up. I do empathize with people that are in heavily populated, high EMF areas. It's really a challenge to mitigate that. And for certain people with certain genetics, I know I'm more sensitive. I'm kind of like a canary in the coal mine. I just simply cannot live in an environment, even on the outskirts of San Diego. It's just too intense. But I do go back to ascorbic acid / vitamin C, magnesium, vitamin E, green wave, dirty electricity filters, blue shield, maybe somavedic. I would put last, which is more on the energetic aspect of things. Maybe try the Magnetico sleep pad. I know when I was living in an RV and my bed was about 10 feet below a big power line, the Magnetico sleep pad made a huge difference in me being able to get a full night's rest. Updated thoughts on vitamin D. It's pretty much the same that I put on the CLF protocol on my Matt-Blackburn website. It's really good to get tested, to get that 25D test and to see where you're at. Depending on your genetics, some people cannot make sufficient vitamin D from sunlight, and so they will need to supplement. And then on the other hand, some people will never have to supplement. But again, if you have to supplement and your 25D is low, then I would take it separate from vitamin K2 to maximize the absorption. Someone says, how to get ferritin up from 8? Is it even important? I feel great. Yeah, it's a good segue from what I was just talking about with vitamin D. If you feel great at a ferritin of 8, awesome. I would say you're fine. There's nothing you need to do. A lot of people I've spoken to do not feel awesome. In fact, they feel horrible with a single digit ferritin. Genetics is super important. It's really important to know what's going on. I'm currently using Self-Decode. I enjoy that platform. It's just really easy to read, and they always have these updates. So kind of getting an understanding of your vitamin D genetics, your iron genetics, your requirements for ascorbate, for vitamin A, how you metabolize caffeine. That can answer a lot of questions very quickly and help you shortcut your way to optimal health. Latest areas of research, I would say it's been ascorbic acid, melatonin, and paraxanthine. Just revisiting vitamin C and melatonin, and then diving into this fascinating new area of paraxanthine. On the melatonin topic, I've been looking into supplementing it during the day. A lot of people were doing that and seeing a huge benefit because that actually recycles NAD back into NADH, and vice versa with ascorbic acid. I know melatonin's gotten a lot of hate, and I still see reels now from health influencers talking about how you never want to take an exogenous hormone because it's going to shut down your own endogenous production. That's been debunked several times. I had Dr. John Lawrence on the show talk about that, and he talks about that in his book called The Melatonin Miracle. It actually does the opposite. That's why it's really important to keep up on the latest research and not just stay stagnant, which is what we do here at the cabin, just constantly research and question our own assumptions. But melatonin, taking it exogenously, actually increases your own endogenous production. So over time, potentially, you actually need to take less and less. But maybe taking more at the start could be beneficial. So I'm currently taking 60 milligrams every night of melatonin before I go to sleep, usually an hour or so before bed. And I'm noticing a great benefit from doing that. So that's a wrap. I'm juggling so much here on the homestead. We just got a used rowboat today. Did a 5-hour round trip drive to pick that up. But it's really nice to go out on the lake on that versus the kayaks. And if I could ever find time away from managing Mitolife, I'll get the fishing pole out. And now I have the perfect rowboat for us to fish from. Check out the website. It's matt-blackburn.com. It's my CLF protocol. If you click on shop, you can see all of my recommended products. Right there on the front page, you'll see update energy drink. And I just wrote up 3 paragraphs at the bottom of that page. That's Matt's thoughts. I have that for most of the recommended products on my site. The reason why I'm excited about it, why I take it, and then I have my discount code Blackburn for that drink. Really fascinating stuff. I've been really excited about it. Then my website is mitolife.co. If you click on shop, you'll see 3 tabs. Under living, we have our grounding sheets. That's silver threads embedded in the cotton sheets. Ideally, you're grounded rod to earth. You can buy the optional grounding rod kit. And we sleep grounded here at the cabin, and it makes a huge difference in the quality of your sleep. If you click on the water tab, you'll notice we updated the pictures on the up-and-coming 7-stage water solution. That's going to be out mid-August. That's coming up really soon, so keep an eye out on that page. We'll also send out a newsletter. Make sure you're subscribed there on the website. We'll announce when that's back in stock. It's been about 9 months in the making for this version. Now, if you click on the wellness tab, you can see all of the different supplements. We have systemic enzymes, digestive enzymes. We have fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin E, vitamin K2. It's the highest dose vitamin K2 on the market, not just for dental health, but also for ATP production, brain function, antioxidant defense, so much more. than just supporting your dental health. We have pure third-party lab-tested Shilajit tablets that are imported straight from Siberia in Russia. Spore-based probiotics, pure niacinamide. No other niacinamide on the market has just bamboo silica with it. There's always magnesium stearate and other fillers in there. There's just pure non-flush B3 with bamboo extract. If you're in a hot, sunny climate, I highly recommend that you take niacinamide every day. That's internal sunscreen. Our newest products are up there at the top. There's Encephalon, Jellyfish Jolt, and Zinc. Been really enjoying Encephalon. I'm taking 4 capsules a day. And like I said earlier, that supplement combined with Update Drink and Jellyfish Collagen and HVMN ketone shots, you're just on another level cognitively. It's just a really enjoyable experience. So I recommend experimenting with that. Check out the Mitolife Academy. That's the YouTube. It's $15 a month, and you get 2 private videos every month of latest research and experimentation, and then a live Q&A usually the last day of every month. So that's a wrap. We have some exciting guests planned for you guys for the rest of this month. See you next Friday. Stay supercharged.